Hello, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're letting people join and get in, and then we will start the webinar shortly. Just give us one more minute. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome to our webinar today, Strategic and Organizational Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in University Housing. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Glucuho Inclusion and Equity Committee. My name is Greta Dieter, and I am the Glucuho Technology Coordinator. I'm hosted at Western Illinois University, and I am the moderator, technologically wise, for today's webinar. Before we begin the webinar, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items with you to maximize your learning for this session. To ask questions, you can type in the Q&A section. The presenters will answer questions as quickly as possible, but want to ensure there's enough time to cover all of their materials and great things they have to share with you. Should you experience any problems, please type in the chat box and we will work to assist you. And at the end of the presentation, the presentation and audio recording will be available on our website, Glucuho, glacuho.org, under the Webinar Archives resource for your future reference. We encourage you to share this resource with your colleagues who are unable to attend today. I will now hand it over to Corey Burton from the Glucuho Inclusion and Equity Committee to get us started today.
Thanks, Greta. Good afternoon and happy Friday. My name is Corey Burton. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I currently serve as the Assistant Director of Multicultural Education at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. I also serve as a current member of the Glucuho's Inclusion and Equity Committee. Our committee's mission is to provide opportunities for the education and professional development of housing officials in the area of inclusion and equity. Before going any further, we would like to do a land acknowledgement. Our various institutions within the region rest on the lands of multiple Native nations. These lands were the traditional birthright of indigenous peoples who were forcibly removed and who have faced centuries of struggle and identity in the wake of deep dispossession. We hereby acknowledge the grounds on which we reside as we strive to address that history so that it guides our work in the present and in the future. As Greta mentioned today, our focus will be on strategic and organizational diversity in university housing. Today, we have with us a great panel of professionals who work in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and who will discuss a variety of different strategies to incorporate DEI into our respective organizations. To get us started, I will hand it over to our moderator for this afternoon, Will Sherry. Will currently serves as a Director of Strategic Initiatives for Student Life at the University of Michigan. I will now hand it over to Will.
Hi, good afternoon. And Corey and Greta, thanks so much. I will be the non-technology moderator. And so that's going to work well for everyone, I think. And so it's so good to be here. Like Corey said, I serve as the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the University of Michigan within Student Life. And in this role, I report to our Vice President of Student Life and focus on developing infrastructure that fosters an increased capacity for partnership across our division, as well as kind of more collective work towards our strategic priorities. I lead cross-functional work teams in kind of developing, planning, and implementing different strategic initiatives, and have specific leadership over a variety of areas, but that does include our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan for our division. So I'm really excited to be here. This topic is something that I work around a lot, and I'm excited to hear what our panelists have to say about their work. So I'm going to read some introductions of each of our panelists, and then we're going to go ahead and move into our first question. So our first panelist I'll introduce is Kimberly Otchere, she, her pronouns. Kim is the inaugural director of Inclusion and Talent Development for University Housing at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. In this role, she provides leadership for strategic diversity, inclusion, training, and staff engagement initiatives in 7 university housing units, which include 2,500 full-time, part-time, and student employees, and over 9,000 residents and families. Prior to that, Kim served as Assistant Director for Social Justice and Leadership Education in Residence Life, responsible for the oversight of Multicultural Advocate Peer Education Program, Identity-Centered Student Group Advising, as well as leadership of DEI training and programs. In addition, Kimberly is highly sought as a nationally recognized intergroup dialogue facilitator for her expertise in using dialogic learning strategies to inform equity and inclusion initiatives. Kim holds an MSW from the University of Michigan and an MBA from the University of Illinois. Welcome, Kim. Our next panelist is Nicole Mehta, she, her pronouns. Nicole serves as the inaugural Assistant Director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for the Department of Residence Life at the University of Maryland, College Park. In her role, she oversees the department's DEI strategic planning, staff development, student engagement, including Common Ground Dialogue program. She also provides leadership in divisional efforts, including co-chairing a planning committee for the Division of Student Affairs' first DEI strategic plan. In her 10+ years of student affairs experience, she has been engaged in DEI work in student activities and residence life. Nicole holds an MA in college student personnel from the University of Maryland, College Park, and she's also a doctoral candidate in UMD's Student Affairs PhD program, with her dissertation focusing on South Asian American women and expanding definitions of leadership. Welcome, Nicole. Our next panelist is Amanda McLittle, she, her pronouns. Amanda has served as the Director of Diversity and Inclusion in Michigan Housing at the University of Michigan since 2014. In her role, Amanda and her team lead diversity and inclusion initiatives for Michigan housing and student life, including courses focused on deepening understanding across differences and building inclusive communities. Her department supervises the nationally recognized Diversity Peer Educator Program, which was the first of its kind. Amanda also provides leadership on the design, programming, and coordination of 18 multicultural lounges. In addition, she presents and consults nationally on designing and creating inclusive spaces and freedom of speech policies within a housing environment. Amanda holds a Juris Doctorate and Master's of Education. Welcome, Amanda. And our last panelist is Karla Benson Rutten, she, her pronouns. Karla has over 20 years of experience leading nonprofit organizations, higher education initiatives, and strategic organizational change rooted in diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a facilitator, trainer, and consultant, Karla works proactively and collaboratively with people, organizations, and communities to ensure their working and living environments are inclusive, equitable, safe, welcoming, and culturally affirming. In all that she does, Karla's ultimate goal is to motivate and inspire people to love who they are, believe in and value the beauty and power of their identities, humanities, and worth, and create the change they seek in themselves and their communities. As an entrepreneur, Karla is the founder of Benson Rutten Innovations, BRI, a coaching, consulting, and training firm focused on DEI strategic leadership development. Karla is also the executive director of Jeremiah Program, JP, in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she is an unapologetic champion for JP's mission of disrupting the cycle of poverty for single moms and their kids 2 generations at a time. She also previously served as the vice president of community engagement at Girl Scouts River Valleys, where she created new and innovative pathways to Girl Scouting for girls of color, and as the director of the Leotad Suzuki Center for the Title IX Coordinator, Director of Equity at McAllister College, and as the Title IX Coordinator, Director of Equity at McAllister College. Karla holds a master's degree in counseling and personnel services from the University of Maryland, College Park, and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Iowa State University. Welcome, Karla. I'm so glad to be here with you all, and I want to just get started kind of learning a little bit more about the context that you all work in. which I think will help all of our participants kind of see where you're all coming from. So if we could start out with each of you sharing your role in strategic work within housing settings. And then if you could specifically speak to kind of outlining your current work, talk a little bit about your staffing structure, and where your current strategic planning work is right now. So just kind of some contexting, and I will pass it over to Kim to get started, and then we can kind of just move around through the four of you.
And if I miss something, Will, just say, hey,
Yeah,
add this thing. Okay.
Absolutely. I will.
Okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Wonderful. So thank you for that introduction, and I'm excited. I was excited just to hear the introductions of my co-panelists. Here at University of Illinois, University Housing, we started this journey 3 years ago. We did not have a unit for inclusion. The closest we got to it was the role that was mentioned in my bio, which is social justice and leadership education within residential life, and that was student facing. This unit is internal. It focuses on our staff, student staff, non-student staff, part-time, full-time, as it relates to then the output, which are the services we provide to the over 9,000 residents, families, guests that we have annually. So the work really started kind of like just developing a thought about what we want it to be. Because I'm an alum of Michigan, I called my dear friend Amanda and I said, Amanda, tell me everything that you all are doing. I want to do the exact same thing. But we know that everything will not look the way that Michigan's model looks like, because they have been at it for a little bit. So we started with just me. Currently, it's just me. Staffing structure, I will be hiring really soon for an assistant director. We have office support, of course. On my wish list is a coordinator for employee engagement, as well as a trainer. We being in the unit, are coupled with talent development. So it's inclusion and talent development. And so the work really is hand in hand, from the affinity groups that we've developed, the first two being women of color and spectrum, to the coaching sessions. The crux, the core of that are to reach our staff who are most underrepresented, underserved, under-resourced, our staff typically who are on the front lines, engaging in the work, who may not have access or typically will not, in our more traditional housing capacity in terms of the roles being RDs, having access to mentors or webinars like this, right? To engage in, to develop their best practices for their career. We have folks who are building service workers who are often say, I'm here for the benefits, but haven't thought of a career. And so those coaching sessions give opportunities to develop who they think they might want to be in terms of career, university housing or housing professionals, and helping them to advance, seeing realize diversity in terms of race, gender in the supervisory and managerial roles, because we were very clear when developing this unit that it was and is currently purpose to diversify our staff. Just like many of our organizations, once you creep to the top of the org chart in these hierarchical structures, it becomes more white, more masculine or man, folks who identify as men in those roles, particularly in our facilities areas. And we want to diversify those areas. And in this short 3 years, we've been able to see some of that change. So the coaching, the affinity programs, training and development, all that kind of sits in that talent development has everything to do with inclusion and trying to operationalize and embed how we do what we say we want to do in terms of inclusion and equity, making sure that that is embedded in how we orient, onboard, train, attempt to retain staff on a daily, annual basis. Did I miss something?
No, that was perfect, and
Okay.
it really resonates a lot. I always have sometimes our work is hard to explain, right? And I think, you did such a good job, and it resonates with me. Often I say, I make sure that what we say we're actually about. And that's part of the strategic work. So that definitely resonates for me, making sure that our actions are connected to our values and our mission and our purpose, and then putting the pieces in place to actually make that a reality. The training, the coaching. You really, I think, spoke to the community that supports our students, and that's critical. Thank you so much.
I forgot to give Maryland a shout out, because the other piece of the work that we're doing right now is a strategic action plan. And so we model our strategic action plan work off of the work that Nicole's department has been doing. So we did almost a 2-year assessment process to look at culture and climate. After we did our focus groups and surveys and all of that, we took that data, and we are currently developing a strategic action plan, a 3-year strategic action plan that will, of course, be extended, again, to operationalize and to think more critically about how we want to implement our inclusion and equity work, so that our staff feel it and experience it, and it's not just something in writing that we say we do. So shout out to Michigan and Maryland. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And Nicole, let's pass it over to you.
Thank you, Will. One of the things I love about this is how connected we are and how we build off of each other's programs. So as Will said, the kind of main areas of my work are around our DEIJ action plan within our department. So that's strategic planning and connections to the division and institutional level. Our staff development. So our resident life department has about 90 professional and grad staff. And we have a combination of department-wide training that we do and structured individualized learning that all of our staff engages in. And then our student engagement. So training and our work with the RAs, our programming. We also have a multicultural advocate program that we started in 2018, modeling it after Illinois and Michigan. In our Common Ground dialogue, in our group dialogue program that continues to grow. So for our staffing structure, similar to Kim, I came into Maryland in a different position. I was program director for the Common Ground Dialogue program. So really focused on training undergraduate peer facilitators and running the day-to-day of the program. And since then, our DEI programming and our DEI initiatives have expanded a lot, right? So now I serve as an assistant director. We also have a full-time coordinator and a graduate assistant for DEI. So all of that has kind of grown since 2018 and has fluctuated since 2018. So this coming academic year will be the first time we have all of those pieces together. And where we are in the strategic planning now. So we're in our second iteration of our DEI strategic plan. So the first one was from 2018 to 2021. It was initiated by our director at the time in response to a lot of national issues, campus incidents that really made our entire campus reevaluate what we were doing with DEI, right? And what we were doing to create safety and an inclusive climate for all of our students. So our director at the time had a relationship with Karla and brought her in to do some consulting with us. So we worked with Karla over the course of about a year to assess where we were and to develop a DEI action plan from 2018 to 2021. And then out of that plan, we created a steering team that served as stewards of the plan. And that committee of staff worked together to develop what the second iteration of it was. So we're in that iteration from 2022 to 2025 now.
Thanks so much, Nicole. We are, it feels similar. We're sort of beginning to embark on our second 5-year plan at Michigan, and it's due on May 15th, so it's definitely top of mind. That time in between, something that our institution did that I really valued and here in what you're saying is that time in between, that time to assess, bring in experts. We had a year of evaluation and then a year of planning built in between both of our 5-year plans. And in so many ways, it was a gift. I don't know that I knew it at the time always, but it really lets you do that deeper assessment and development of a next iteration that I have found helpful so far. Karla, let's pass it over to you and then to Amanda.
All right, thanks, Will, and Kim and Nicole, great to hear from you. I won't take long since I'm not currently at a college or a university, but what I do, but have long experience in colleges and universities working in lots of different functional areas, and actually began my work working in residential life and housing. And so that definitely is where my heart is and was for a while. Really for my work as a DEI consultant and trainer and executive coach, I work with senior leadership to do what Nicole was talking about, what we did with the Department of Resident Life, to really work with the senior leadership at a college or university or nonprofit or whatever it is, but specifically at colleges and universities, within departments, with the entire executive team at a college, depending upon the size, but really thinking about how do you move from where you want to be to actually take those action steps that we've been talking about, to actually implement a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that is aspirational and sustainable and actionable, right? And so I really work with the leadership to get everyone ready to prepare the way for it and kind of determine if you're ready to do it, right? And what are you ready to do, right? Is there training that needs to happen first? Do you need a strategic plan around diversity, equity, and inclusion, or do you need to start with some training first, right? To get some basic understanding of what we even mean by diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I work with senior leaders to think about where to assess where their department, their division, their college or university even is, and really be thoughtful and work with lots of folks from lots of different levels of leadership to make sure we're creating something that's human-centered, equitable, and inclusive, right? So that's the work that I do.
Thanks so much, Karla. I really appreciate the some of what I hear and what you're saying around the importance of a plan, not just being for planning's sake. The getting to the real work, even if that is starting before what you want to be writing, because that's where you really are. So that's so valuable. Thank you. And Amanda, I'll pass it over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I, like Kim said, I have a benefit of having a unit that has programs that are very historical and are actually 50 years old, which started to kind of pave the way for conversations before I even came to the University of Michigan. My department, Diversity and Inclusion, has been a standalone unit in housing since 2012. And the reason that was done is because there were historical programs that they really wanted to see grow, and they wanted to see the work grow from not just being about students, but professional staff also. And so the work that my unit does is really rooted in housing, obviously, but then also in student life. We do a lot around education, whether it's classes, workshops, trainings. We do a lot of consultations. My department is responsible for all climate response in the residential communities when someone feels like they don't belong or an incident occurred. And then we manage the 2 historical programs that the second one is celebrating its 50th year. So the Diversity Peer Educator Program, which is students that live in the residence halls working on creating an inclusive community. It was the first of its kind in the country. And came out of the Black Action movement, which Michigan is known for, where in the early 70s, a lot of students came forward with, especially Black students, saying, we don't feel included and this is what we need to see. and they created the program that eventually became the DPEs. We also have the Multicultural Lounge program, which was started in 1971 from Black Action Movement, which were, again, students saying we wanted to have spaces where we could go and see ourselves in those spaces and celebrating our culture. And so that has grown to be 18 different multicultural spaces. And what housing saw is we just need the staff to be able to focus on these things and grow the department. When we became a standalone unit in 2012, there was 2 people, myself as a coordinator, a director, and an admin. We are now 9 people. So there's the director, me, an associate director. I have 2 assistant directors. I have 4 program managers. I have an admin. And we have 60 student staff that we manage in 4 different positions. So we've grown a lot in 10 years, and we'll probably continue to grow, which we're very fortunate for. I work very closely with Will. So when he mentioned the DEI strategic plan, we're finished the first one. We're in the middle of evaluation and assessment, planning for the second year. Even though there's a divisional one, I still do a housing one. Every year I really think about what are the strategic goals that I need to meet to both support our students and our staff. This year, the prime thing that my staff will be used to me saying is, what are we doing to reduce barriers for students? And so that's what we're really focused on right now. And whenever we pick whatever it's going to be our thing that year, we really think about what are the steps that we need to meet each year. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Can I just add something to that, Will, really quick?
Please do. Please do.
So Amanda, I love what you said about there is a larger departmental one. I think you even maybe said an institutional one, or did you say a departmental one? There's a plan.
A divisional one, yeah.
Divisional one, and within your department, you also have one, right? And that's part of, I think what we're getting into next about buy-in, right? When you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, a strategic plan, it's so important that every department owns that, right? And so that you're working in tandem with that plan, but there are specific things and markers and strategies that you'll have for your department. So just wanted to say I love that, Amanda, and that's really key. And sometimes we forget, but that's how you make it actionable, right? So it's not just this plan that's on a shelf, but here's how you work it into the plan. Each department will now figure out what this looks like in their specific area so that all staff see themselves in it. And then there's accountability too. So I just wanted to name that.
Thank you.
That is definitely kind of right where we are. I think our first 5 years was a lot of assessing. Like, what do we have to work with? Who are our staff? Who are the people that are interested? What are the issues? And how many programs look like each other? And how do we kind of begin to look at those things? And then to exactly what you're saying, Karla, I think where we are now is setting kind of divisional goals. And we have found it really beneficial that we have an institutional plan made up of, I want to say 52 divisional plans. And then student life is one of those 52. Then in student life, we have 26 units. Some of those units have plans like Amanda's speaking to, and some don't. And that's kind of exactly where we are right now. And I feel exactly what you're saying, that how do we really have it be everyone's plan? And those are some of the critical questions that we're asking ourselves. This next kind of set of questions, I'm gonna, for our panelists, I'm gonna kind of put these 2 together. So if you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you face in doing DEI strategic work in housing settings, examples, maybe budgets, staffing, other challenges, and kind of what have you done to work through those challenges? Maybe talking some on the creating buy-in, what has that looked like? How have you, I won't say like overcome those challenges, but navigated them and worked through them. And I'm just going to kind of open it up, and whoever wants to start, and then let you all kind of opt into the conversation where you feel like you have something to add, and then we'll move on once we feel like we exhausted that topic. So yeah, who wants to start?
I can. So as I said before, I called Amanda and I said, what do we need to do so that we can have your structure? And she said immediately, it requires a commitment from the director, right? So you are always going to be in need of something when it comes to budget. And unless there is a strong commitment to say, no matter what, we are committing dollars and human capital to make this happen, you won't have anything. And so we decided to move into this work. It was like January 2020. We know what happened by March, and we know what happened when we had to send students home, when we had to refund residents, right? Like the budgets, it kind of decimated many of the plans that we had, not just in our housing area, but across the country for many housing departments. So the conversation that I had with our executive director at the time was, Michigan, they said that we need to make the commitment and it has to happen. And so we, for the past couple of years, have been a part of the executive director's budget. And so within the last year, we established, okay, this is where we're going to start with a budget for this particular unit. So some of those budget constrictions, I would say that for me, they were self-imposed. I felt that I couldn't spend, or I didn't want to spend, because we're in COVID times. We're resident focused. We needed to make sure that as many dollars and cents we had were meeting the bottom line so we could actually produce service. But we also had to pay attention to the staff that were tired, exhausted, leaving, right? Like, how do we retain staff? How do we continue to boost morale? What would that look like? How do we train staff and make sure that they have what they need to be able to be successful? Much of the work that I did in that first year, since we did not have a lot of budget and there were no staff at all, it was consulting with our units, right? Hey, dining, what are your needs? Hey, facilities, what's happening? Marketing, communications, information office, what's going on? Business services. And so what I heard resoundingly was, we continue to have climate issues. It feels hostile for some of our staff. And we believe that that is because there are incidents of bias and intolerance that our supervisors do not feel equipped to manage and to support their staff. So to Karla's comment earlier, sometimes you need training before you need a plan and assessment. We needed training. And that's where we started. And so I had to work in terms of the shortage of staffing and that being a challenge for us. I'm so really, happy that I was internal, because I knew my folks. I knew my folks internally who were great trainers, who I didn't even have to, I didn't have to blink and think, do you kind of know what I mean when I say diversity, equity, and inclusion? I know you know what I mean, because I know you've been doing the work already. So I would work with them to co-host and co-facilitate trainings, to develop a curriculum for them and let them run with the training, because I can't train everyone all the time. Bring in external folks. And I really appreciate the leadership, our executive leadership team, our executive director, for continuing to say, this is a priority and we will cover it. Whatever the cost is, we'll make sure that it happens. So much so that, like I said before, now we're adding new staff. We have an established budget for ourselves. I appreciate that buy-in that you have to get from colleagues to identify. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I just love how in housing, sometimes, maybe not everywhere, you find like this secret money. So they were like, we have these vending machines all around campus, and we actually have money that comes in we have revenue that comes in from these random, it was not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, and like $100 million budget, right? And so I had a colleague and they said, well, what should we do with this money? And I'm just sitting like, I don't know, what kind of programming could we do? And I had a colleague say, well, Kim is not a revenue producing unit and she needs money. So let's filter that money annually over. I said, yes, I need colleagues to speak up when I'm blinking on myself, when I'm not in the room. And that has been the investment of time with each of those units when establishing ourselves, to establish myself as a resource to them, and to also say, how can I support what you're doing as a director, right? Individually, not just your unit and everything else that's going on, but where are you developmentally and how can I support your growth? So shout out to family and graduate housing, because that unit director was supporting me in that moment. And so I really appreciated that. But those are some of the staffing and budget areas that we've needed support in, and how we've tried to overcome that a bit.
I would say for me, I've had the benefit of my upline always strongly supporting the work that we do in the unit. Even with turnover, whether it was the director of housing, the associate vice president, or the vice president. My challenges really come from my underestimation of what it means to be at a PWI, and the level of resistance from colleagues, and the level of resistance I get when I do start to get the things that I need to support staff and students. And, you know, there's also a lot of behind conversations around, well, why does D&I always get it? Why do they always get the nice stuff? Why do they get the additional money? And that has created challenges for myself, my staff, for some of our students who overhear those things, that I've had to navigate by, one, building relationships, but two, I got to a point where I was like, I just need to kind of let that be behind and not think about it. And I just really focus on doing the work and letting the work shine sometimes, instead of what I'm saying shine. When we were prepping for this, Nicole mentioned something that was super helpful in thinking about my challenges around the fact that, you know, we are in a really privileged place in the sense of I have budget, I have staff, I have student staff. But the challenge then becomes this idea of, well, they'll do it. And if they'll do it, then I don't have to learn to do it, or I'll just send everybody to them. And capacity gets expanded very quickly when everyone is like, well, D&I will do it. D&I has the answers. D&I will respond to that email. And that is not something I have a perfect answer to, but we continue to just kind of work through it, train, build partnerships. But those are really where my challenges come from.
I can go off of that because I think there's this tension between increasing your staffing numbers and your team and the kind of committee support, at least in our department, right? So we have 2 full-time folks in our capacity, even from 2020 has expanded, right? And our department understands that. So we have 3 committees related to DEI, right? One for our strategic plan that stewards it, one for our DEI staff development, and one for student diversity programs. So I think that allows for people who are interested in kind of different facets of DEI to be involved, right? So within our department of 90, about 1/3 of the folks are on one of those committees, right? And I think that really helps in building buy-in across the department, and more folks talking about what we're doing besides our DEI team, right? So it's more out there and ingrained, because we're a huge campus and we can't be in every building, right? And in every meeting. I think one of our biggest challenges in the beginning was our staff development piece. 5-6 years ago, we had a very kind of opt-in culture when it came to DEI development. Folks had mandatory onboarding around DEI, but beyond that, it was kind of opt-in, right? And within the action plan that we worked with Karla on, we built in staff expectations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? So switching from this opt-in culture to something that this is expected of everyone, it was difficult to get buy-in, right? So we really had to think about how are we building in access at different entry points, because we had everyone from, you know, people who had never really talked about white supremacy culture before, and people who have their own podcast about it, right? So how do you include everyone in that? I think another piece related to what Kim was talking about with getting buy-in from your director, for us, it's been really helpful to be intentional about getting buy-in from all full-time supervisors. So folks can talk about specifically, why is this important in our specific team or our functional area, right? We're not creating these individual goals around DEI because Nicole or the director said that that's an expectation. We're saying it because it's integral to the mission of our work, right? So getting that buy-in, it takes a lot of time, right? But I think it's really important to moving our work forward.
Yeah. Only thing I'll add, because I know we want to get to Q&A. I'm looking at the time too. I'll just sort of echo a little bit what folks said. Kim, I love what you were talking about, everything you said, particularly about finding those unlikely allies that can support you in the work. Also, again, the buy-in starts at the top. It starts with the divisional leader. It starts with the department leader. It starts with the president, right? Who is out there being that advocate for the organization and saying, this is why it's important. These are our values. Here's the vision. Here's our priorities. Here's how you're involved, right? That comes from the top. And so what does that then look like? Well, you work on that as a division, as a department, as a university or college, but that really does start at the top. Can't say that enough. So yeah, and that staffing piece, thank you, Kim and Amanda, Nicole as well. What I always say is an organization's priorities and values are rooted in where they spend their money. This is important. This is a value. You're going to put money toward it, right? And you're going to trust that the people leading that effort are going to steward that, right? So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, the budget piece and the balance of these things that sometimes in that conversation, it's, well, if it's everyone's work, they have budgets. And it's like, yes, and there also needs to be this like centralizing, coordinating expertise place that I hear you all talking about, that we often use words like, building capacity. Like really like looking at your organization and thinking, how can we sort of lift everyone's skills when everyone is in different places, and passion and interest and commitment, and the different strategies that you all spoke to, from consulting, building relationships. I just am finishing up a one-on-one with every unit leader. And at first I wasn't sure. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna, I'm gonna meet with everyone and I'm gonna share some things and hear some things. But honestly, just the act of having the time together was huge. We could have been talking. That was, we'll get to the work. Like I had to make the connections. And some of them I had, and we could talk about the work, but some of them I clearly didn't have. And I needed to learn their work before I could come in and talk about how this work connects. I was like, oh, I don't know your work. I have some work to do. And that kind of, relationship piece has been really, really critical. We have 2 questions in the Q&A. And so I'm gonna move us towards those and kind of back and forth. So the first one is asking, when building a DEI team or unit, do you encourage a start with a director or coordinator level staff to kind of balance the work? So do you all have any suggestions, if you're starting this work, what sort of level staff might you advocate for, and why?
I was going to say, Kim actually asked me this question when she called.
Okay.
And I've been helping M Dining with something similar. I say start with the director. There has to be someone who's at the table who can advocate. If you don't start with a director, it easily gets pushed aside. You don't make room for it. You don't have someone advocating for it. You don't have someone who's part of the decision-making, the strategic planning. I think it has to start with a director level, and then you build the team underneath them. That's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. Here's what I would say. It's not either or, it's both. you start with a director and a coordinator, because that director needs somebody to support them and help them with logistics. And so this is what I tell leaders. It's like, if you need a team, I love, Kim, that you started a department by yourself. I wish you had had someone with you too. That is building success. You're setting someone up with success. So it doesn't have to be an either or. No other department starts with one person, except for when it comes to DEI. So when I work with senior leaders, it's like, if you're thinking this is a one person department, you're not ready. You're not ready. You're going to have too many expectations of one person. They cannot manage it. Right. And so let's build it with what you need: a director and a support staff, whether that's an executive assistant, a coordinator, maybe it's a director and an executive assistant, or a director and an operations manager. That's what it is. It's always both and. It's not an either or. And that's the mindset shift that we need to make.
We can go back to that too. This next question is was already on our minds as well, but I have to just go back. I love that, Karla. I appreciate that. And in many facets of work, I think and I hear it from you all too, we often are trying to get what we can get, which is where we are. And I think where many people are, and it is a mindset shift because we also see our colleagues and ourselves lined up against expectations. And that is really critical, especially when there is that kind of ripple effect. Well, over there, this didn't work. And it's like, well, maybe it didn't work, because it was under-resourced and things like that. So it impacts beyond ourselves as well. This next question is on alignment with other divisional plans, which is, I know, something we had planned to talk about. So it's asking, how important is external alignment with your division versus starting the work in your particular area? For example, if you are ready and have the funding, should you wait for the division to catch up, or press on the gas and go? So I want to open that up to y'all.
I can start with this one. So we're kind of a little bit in this situation, right? So we have our second iteration of the plan, and our division is currently in the process of creating its first DEI strategic plan, right? And that process started in fall 2021, right? So we had this moment of, do we wait or do we go ahead, right? I would recommend moving if you can, right? And then using the divisional plan to elevate what you're doing and keep the momentum going, right? To keep it at the forefront of folks' mind, because once the divisional plan comes out, you can intentionally align what you're doing with that plan. And also hopefully have folks involved in creating that plan, so you can find ways that the divisional plan can also support and enhance what you're doing in your department too.
That's why we're at the place now with our culture and climate strategic action plan. It's only 3 years, because our student affairs strategic plan, not focused specifically on DEI, wraps up when we plan to wrap up. So it's already underway, and it's kind of like foreshadowing some of my comments about things that I've learned, but you just have to go. You just have to move. If I had to wait until I had the budget, all the thousands of dollars, all the dozens of, if I had the level of staffing that Michigan Housing has, then I would still be waiting, because they're 10 years in the game and I'm just getting started. I'm on year 3. So I had to just get going, and I had to press the gas. And we will catch up, so that, to Nicole's point, we will align with the work that student affairs will have underway real soon. But I think in a way, what we then have the opportunity to do is, as a department that is resourced, and so I say that for some areas that may not be resourced and may not have the capacity, right? So just like Nicole said earlier, we have an inclusion committee that is kind of owning this strategic action plan work and the culture and climate assessment work that has happened, because we didn't have a full staff, but we have staff in housing. And I know that everyone's structure looks different. But what that does set us up to do is to be able to be reference points for the division, right? So when things are happening and there are opportunities, resources that might become available, we're at that table of decision making, to Amanda's point, around having director level staffing at first. We can have the kind of conversations that sometimes the ways in which organizations they don't necessarily prioritize coordinator level roles that are engaged in the work. They say, oh, that's programmatic, it's not strategic. That's not a part of the conversation right now. And so I think that it is important to Karla's point, have both and be at the table and hit go, right? And not wait for additional funding or anything like that. Just work with what you have.
Will could probably answer this for me because he would know I am a full speed ahead kind of person. I do not wait. But I have learned in my time that while I have my eye on where I'm going, I'm also constantly having conversations with people. So it still feels like people are coming with me. And if they don't want to go as fast as I am, that's fine. But at least I engaged them in a conversation. At least they knew where my head was. At least they knew. Will knows I'm working on a multicultural summit for inclusive spaces and designing spaces. Everyone's like, I don't have time. And I'm like, that's fine. But on May 2024, I'm doing it. So either we're doing it together, and people will slowly start to come along with you and want to get involved. And if you just waited until that moment happened, you would just slow that process.
Yeah, Karla, you go ahead.
All about education. Please pick up the book, Why We Can't Wait. Martin Luther King Jr. You read that. Okay, that's that. But I love what you said, Amanda. It's true. It's like, I would say, don't be afraid to be a model for the division, for the college, for a department. You be the model, do your work, right? And show what does work. Other folks will come along. Because if we want things to change, we have to do things differently. And so I would say in student affairs in particular and housing, be that model. We know how to do the work, right? Get it elevated, as Nicole was saying, which is happening there. But for sure, just why wait, right? Yeah, just echoing that.
We have one more question. So I'm thinking we've got about 8 minutes. So, and if there is another question, feel free to type it in. But I'm thinking that we'll do some takeaways and maybe address this last question alongside some of those, because I think it fits well. And so this last question, I think, is really relevant to a lot of people. It says, some of our housing units are really flat. We can't hire new folks, but we want to be strategic. But when it's just me and a few staff on a team, what areas do you recommend jumping into to shaping the vision in relation to DEI? So maybe as you think about some of your own takeaways, also think about where you might suggest someone get started in this work. What might be some critical things if there isn't the ability to build a team or hire people? Maybe it's a committee, is a little bit of how I'm reading this. Maybe it's not a unit, a department, something like that. And then any other takeaways that you might have. Anyone want to get us started?
I can. I will say that, as I've said before, I'm super achievement oriented because, Michigan people, we just tend to be, everyone is, but especially Michigan people, there's just something about us. I needed to have all the pieces to the puzzle. I needed the puzzle to be like this 1,000-piece puzzle. I needed everything to be right because I said, when we start, I want it to be like a firm foundation. And I had potholes because I just did not have I didn't have everything, right? So the road has been rough, and it's okay. It's okay just to get going. It's okay for your timeline to be pushed. My executive director will tell you that I have been out of myself. On a personal note, I've had 2 kids since I started in this role. And so taking leave, like 3 or 4 months of leave in the middle of trying to do strategic plan work is like the assessment, I'm like, we can't wait another 5 months. I need people to go while I'm out. But we couldn't, and it's okay. And the work will get done. And as we look at the research, we know that it takes at least 7 years to shift culture in an organization, right? Climate just continues on and on. So I think that another takeaway for me has been that I have to be in it for the long haul. And so in the interim, in these short kind of spurts, what can I do in terms of organizational development? So the question that's been asked when you have a flat organization, one of the things as I was going on my, not necessarily a listening tour, but consulting with the units, someone from HR said, we keep asking these diversity questions in our interviews, but do we know what we're looking for? You should not ask a question that you don't have the answer for. So would you say across all of our 7 units, everyone knows how we define diversity, equity, and inclusion? No, we don't. So let's define that, right? It can be some really simple things like that, and then work to make sure that that is communicated widely so everyone knows it. Put it on your website. So then when you have folks, you have traffic to your website, you have, future employees, they could see, oh, this is how you define it. This is, I think my definition lines up a little bit differently. What do you mean when you say this? We also worked in that interim time when, we were kind of, looking for ways again to make the work big, but we were still really small. We wanted to make sure that in each job description, we were holding staff accountable, right? We were looking at the both and. So yes, everyone's like, supervisors need to be trained and held accountable for doing the work. Well, all staff do. And it needs to be in job descriptions, from the building service worker to the executive director, everybody. So we created 2 different statements to be embedded in all of the duties and responsibilities that are at a supervisory level and at an all staff level. Those were 2 not simple, but ways that we felt like this is within our area of control that we can manage, that would take a little bit of energy, but was we were capable of managing without having a 10-person team.
Thanks so much. Those are some really great kind of direct things that someone can do right away and kind of look into. Thank you for that. We'll just kind of go around with some closing comments. I know people likely have meetings and what have you. So I'll pass it to Nicole for some closing comments, and then to Amanda, and then to Karla.
With a small team, I would say identifying what your overall goals are related to DEI, how those relate to your mission, and also identifying campus partners that can help with that, right? It doesn't have to be your department doing all of those pieces, but how can you partner? And regardless of the size of your department or the team, I think it's important to think about how we balance those tangible action steps and that accountability with flexibility and the reality of our work, right? It's housing, a lot comes up and throws wrenches in our days and our years. So how do we keep those overall goals at the front of mind and not get so rigid with our action steps that we lose sight of that, right? And talking about how we're messaging around the plan and how we're engaging with it also.
I would just add, especially thinking about that question, I would start by seeking to understand what the students need, and then using that as your foundation for what you propose or whatever comes next, even if what the students tell you what they need is different than what you were planning on doing. Everything that I have been given an easy yes to, everything that we do has started with, these are what the students need, and this is what I heard. So I just think seeking to understand will really help kind of build the foundation of where you go next.
Yes, Amanda, I was going to say the exact same thing. Listening sessions, that's a great way to start, right? And particularly listening to the most marginalized people in your campus, students, staff, faculty, whoever's within your housing department. Let's do some listening sessions, hear what folks are saying, and center the needs of those who are the most marginalized, who are experiencing the most marginalization, the most disparities, and go from there. Then build your case for what you need. And you might actually be able to advocate for more staff to do the work. that will meet the needs of all the students, and in particular, those who have been most marginalized, right? So that we can create that environment so that there is truly that equity. I also love what Kim said about you might just need to define what diversity, equity, and inclusion means generally. There are definitions, they're not the same. We want to make sure people are clear about that. Then what does that look like in your department, right? How do you see those? What's happening now? Where do you want to be? So those would be my closing thoughts.
Thank you all so much. We did it. 4 o'clock. That was an amazing amount of really helpful and insightful information. So thank you to those who asked really important questions, and to the 4 of you for sharing your work. I'm going to pass it back to Greta and Corey, and we're going to wrap up.
Perfect. Just a big thank you to everyone again. And as I mentioned previously, the recording of this webinar will be posted on our website, glacuho.org, glacuho.org. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you all so much. Have good afternoons.